Welcome, everyone. Let us now continue our work on the book The Light on the Path. I would like to show you the edition I'm working with. This small pocket edition from the Theosophical publisher seems quite good to me, without discrediting the others, which I do not know. But this is a very comfortable edition, even to carry around, and the text is excellent. I recall that we spoke a little about the book before, so I will not go into further detail about that, nor about the author's background. The author is named Mabel Collins, and the book was written in 1885. This book addresses 21 preparatory steps and 21 steps through which we literally enter the path of seeking wisdom, of seeking human fulfillment. These first 21 steps serve as a preparation to set foot on the path. I use an example that I always share in the classroom when I talk about Stoic philosophy, which is for you to imagine. An image, at times, is worth more than 1,000 words. Picture a hot air balloon, the kind people travel in, with a basket hanging below and a few passengers inside. Imagine that you are among these passengers, yourself and 2 or 3 other people, and the balloon is firmly tied to the ground. You all begin to discuss what clouds are. What do you think they might be, huh? Could they be foam? Are they smoke? What could that be? Well, what could we say about that? Before speculating about the clouds, focus on cutting the ropes that tie you to the ground. Naturally, you will rise, reach the level of the clouds, and then you can reach out your hand and observe and do not speculate. This is the moment to cut the ties, the moral ties, the bonds of a basic character formation, of emotional balance, of spiritual equilibrium, of fundamental self-knowledge, these refinements of personality. This is the work of these first 21 steps that we are about to begin. So let us move on to the first of them, the first of the 21 exoteric, preparatory steps. They are mandatory in order to set foot on the path. The first one says the following: kill ambition. Ambition is something with many facets, and we will return to this topic in other steps, but basically it is rooted in one idea: separateness. The heresy of separateness, as the voice of the silence says, is the mother of a series of flaws, including ambition itself. I cannot desire what I already have. If there is no void between you and me, if deep down we are one, I cannot wish for something of yours for myself, it already is. I already belong to the whole, and all things are shared within the whole. So, it is as if my hand wished to possess my foot, wished to take something from my foot for itself. That would be foolish. Everything is part of one body. So, when I conceive that there is truly nothing between you and me, in some way, I think that your loss could, in fact, bring me gain, that your unfortunate circumstance could bring me profit. But there is nothing, the universe is complete, where being touches being, recalling a bit of the Socratic. In other words, there are no separate vessels in the universe, we are one great family. And this includes not only humanity, but all of manifested nature as a whole. So, ambition arises from wanting to possess things that do not belong to us. This means that we limit our own identity. There is this small cluster of organic matter that today bears our name. And this sense of separateness gives rise to selfishness, to violence, to anxiety. And this anxiety blocks any possibility of understanding the one. Because between selfish, isolated anxiety and the universal oneness that excludes nothing, there is a great difficulty in understanding. Wisdom is seeing things through the eyes of the one. If unseparated, I cannot see myself as one. Therefore, overcoming separateness, and consequently, overcoming anxiety in all its countless forms. There is an example that I really like to give. Today, we judge people by what they have. Traditionally, if you look throughout history, a person's value was not tied to what they possessed. In fact, we don't even remember very well what people owned. A person's value is connected to what they gave. A human being is as great as their generosity. If we consider the great individuals who have marked history, they were those who gave so much. They gave so much that even today we still receive much from what they did and left for us. Nature will always require, as we seek to grow, that we offer something on other levels. Until a certain moment comes when you say, no, not this. That's fine, nature respects that, but that is your limit. This does not mean giving away all your material possessions, because that is neither necessary nor would it be effective. Nature asks for things in increasingly subtle layers. Let's look at an example I really enjoy sharing, which comes from a story. From my collection of Zen stories, which I always use in my lectures. One of them, quite well known, tells of a very generous prince, a prince who was extremely altruistic in material terms and who dreamed of becoming a disciple of a certain master. This Zen master, who was regarded as very wise, would receive the prince every day as he came to sit at the master's feet. One day, this prince arrived and said, "Master, today I heard about selfishness. And I didn't quite understand what that is. Could you explain it to me?" The master took this opportunity to put him to the test so that he might understand the reason why. He was not accepted as a disciple. The master turned red, made a face of indignation, and said to the prince, "How foolish! How can you have the nerve to be so stupid and ask me a question like that?" The prince jumped up and said, "Wait a minute, how can you treat me like this? Who do you think I am? I am a prince." Then the master smiled and said, "See? This is selfishness." In other words, on the material level, he was very generous. There was no poverty in that kingdom. He was willing to give on the material level. But when it came to the emotional and mental plane, the opinion others had of him, how much him considered, respected, admired, on that level, he was selfish. And he was not willing to give. Therefore, his limit was there. His generosity was restricted to the material plane. If you were to give on that level, perhaps it would open up a demand on a subtler plane, that of ideas. Give me these ideas, and I will give you others that are broader. Perhaps on a subtler plane of spirituality, surrender your sense of separateness to me. Come, and I'll show you the one. In other words, a person is as great as their generosity. And anxiety is a barrier. Anxiety is a limit. It is a cage. It makes us small, longing to bring the things of the world into our cage, instead of going out and uniting ourselves with the world. So, it has many side effects that keep us bound to ignorance. Refine your motivations, but do not lose them. This is something interesting. We say, "I will no longer be anxious," or at least that is what the first step asks of us. But our motivations are all tied to this. Personal anxieties connected to selfishness, to possessions that, in some way, enhance my own personality. Notice the word success, which is, I believe, a perfect example of today's society. A word crafted for the modern world. Success, by our standards, means having gained something over someone else. It means gaining at the expense of someone else's loss, at the cost of someone else's disadvantage. Imagine that you take part in a race and come in first place, and you go to tell a friend. You say, "I won first place." "Wow, that's wonderful." How many people were in the race? There were 1,000 people. And what place did they come in? Everyone came in first place. Everyone finished together with me. We all won. Oh, that's no fun. Your success lost its appeal. Notice how curious this is. For your success to have meaning, it has to be built upon. The failure of 999 people winning together has no flavor. This kind of motivation, which depends on separateness, will have to be overcome. At this moment, if we remove this motivation, perhaps we become apathetic, lacking even the energy to get out of bed, because what often pulls us out of bed is ambition, the anxiety for personal gain. We must refine our sense of fulfillment in the direction of being motivated by the joy of others, being motivated by the gain of the whole, being motivated by looking back and seeing that the world became a little better because of my contribution, even if there is no recognition from the world towards me. But the seeds I planted have sprouted, even if there isn't a plaque on each of those trees saying, "Planted by so-and-so." In other words, may our motivations be the good itself, and not the recognition for the good we have done. This refinement is a slow process that we must build day by day. To learn to admire the beauty that Gregorio de Matos brought to the world without seeking any credit for ourselves. Simply to realize that we have left the world a little better than we found it. This is an extremely necessary process in life. Otherwise, along with anxiety, our motivation also dies. And we must avoid that. Continuing on, we come to the second step, which is to kill the desire to live. Our consciousness is identified with the ephemeral, with that which is fleeting, and this causes us to cling to the desire to live, to the desire to remain, instead of embracing the desire to flow, which is what would truly be necessary. Because the only thing that truly belongs to us in this entire process is our consciousness, which expands toward ever greater light. Physical matter does not belong to us. Nothing that is truly yours can ever be taken from you. This here will be taken from us, therefore, it is not ours. Understand, it is not about killing the love for life, but about letting go of the desire to cling to the forms through which you identify with life, to the forms you were meant to inhabit at certain moments. In other words, it is about flowing through life, not breaking the flow, the process of life itself. To kill the desire to live means to live by surrendering to this flow, without clinging to every element you encounter along the way. One interesting thing, when we reflect on this stage, is our relationship with the past. Does the past imprison us or propel us forward? Iona. Our national director at New Aropolis often gives an example that I find very insightful. Imagine that you buy a house, you make a lot of sacrifices and finally purchase that wonderful home. Then, one fine day, you receive an amazing offer, professionally appealing and giving you the chance to do good things, inviting you to live in another city. No, I can't. What about my house? In this case, the past has imprisoned you. But what if you use that house as a foundation to propel yourself into the future? Well, with the money that this house will generate for me, I can start my life somewhere else with a certain advantage. In other words, it can either propel me toward the future or imprison me. The way we deal with the events of the past often determines whether the past becomes a burden, which it could be, or it could become fuel, a driving force for the future. Reflect on this. Our children, how we miss the days when they were so little. I feel the same. I also have 2 daughters, and I too feel nostalgic. But everything beautiful that we have experienced should serve as a driving force, inspiring me to give more, to create new bonds, new children, not necessarily in the physical sense. But in every aspect, they have given me so much, I have learned many things, and together we have experienced wonderful moments. Now, let us share these wonderful things with the world. In other words, the past can either imprison us or propel us forward. And this is a fundamental element for us to learn how to navigate life. Because if the past becomes a burden, at a certain point, there is no longer a future. It prevents us from moving forward, and we become entirely focused on what is behind us. It is like a car with its headlights facing backward. When they are turned to the past, they no longer illuminate our path ahead. We walk blindly. Not opposing the flow of life is also a very interesting element that we must consider. Imagine that you are on a train journey, and there is a destination you must reach, which gives meaning to the journey. But along the way, there are several stops where you get off, spend some time, learn something, and then return to your carriage. You bring with you the experience you gained at that stop. And each time the train resumes its journey, you are a little more enriched by the experiences that each station has given you. This allows you to have more resources to reach your final destination. Do not get stuck. Do not get off at a station and remain there. Trust in the flow of life. Let it carry you forward. There is a very interesting element in this regard that I have brought to discuss with you. I found, casually, in quotation marks, because I do not believe in chance, a short phrase from an American writer, well, not exactly a writer, but a great inventor, that strongly reinforces the idea I would like to share with you at this stage. It is from an American of the last century named Richard Buckminster Fuller. He was the creator of many inventions, some of which are still in use today. I found this very special phrase of his. See how interesting it is. I live on earth, in the present, and I do not know what I am. I know that I am not a category. I am not a thing, a name. I seem to be a verb, an evolutionary process, an integral function of the universe. I found this so beautiful because it was something that, as my grandmother would say, I had been pondering for a long time. I have the impression that we are not nouns, we are verbs. Nouns are markers along the way. Our fluid consciousness, which passes through all of this, constantly learning, is a verb. It moves among the markers of nouns. It is no coincidence that Epictetus, the great Stoic philosopher, said that happiness is also a verb. The beautiful things that our consciousness carries and builds flow along the markers of life. And our consciousness, traveling through these parameters of time, that truly belongs to us. So, being able to see ourselves as travelers in the flow of time, in the flow of life. Gathering things along the way, but moving forward without attachments. To love life is to love the process through which life flows, and not to want to linger on the small elements we encounter along the way. That would mean killing the desire to live. I would like to draw some attention to this author, Richard Fuller, who was considered one of the great inventors of the 20th century. He was an extremely, let's say, someone who, at the age of 32, lived in a state of complete deprivation. Poor, without any kind of resources, without an education, he never attended a university. At the age of 32, his daughter died of pneumonia caused by the cold in the city of Chicago. And he recounted that, at that moment, he was preparing to take his own life. Everything was ready for him to commit suicide, and he decided to make a challenge to himself. Instead of ending my life, I'll use the rest of my days to prove to myself that even a single human being can significantly change the destiny of humanity and the world as a whole. He dedicated himself to this purpose and became a remarkable figure, receiving 26 honorary doctorate degrees during his lifetime for the difference he made. By believing that he needed to detach himself from mere facts and become a process guided by a single intention, to bring people together. To add life, in the same way that he received life, to add life to the world, to add life to humanity. And he reached a level of metaphysics. He was an inventor of material things, but he attained a metaphysical understanding of this kind. He realized that he was a verb, and verbs do not cling to nouns, they flow through language. And that is essentially what this stage has to teach us. Let us be verbs. Moving forward. Living extinguishes the desire to live. Simply surrender yourself to the flow of life, and there will be no desires. And we'll realize that death validates what is eternal. In the face of death, we will see that this verb that flowed, that perceived, that grew, that matured, cannot be taken from us. Everything else will be taken away. Death compels us to face an unavoidable reality. Everything else will be taken from us. But this verb, which carries with it the experiences of the world and spread life wherever it went, this will never be taken from us. Moving forward, let us look at the third step. It extinguishes the desire for comfort. Understand this well. What is harmful is the desire, not the comfort itself. I'm telling you to throw away your mattress and sleep on the floor. That would be unwise, serving no purpose for anyone, not even for your back. That would make no sense at all. Comfort itself is not bad, but the desire for comfort is, because it is a subdivision of that previous step, the desire to live. By wanting to remain in a place of comfort, in a comfort zone, I interrupt the flow of life. Now, if you are flowing with the current of life and comfort appears along your path, enjoy it. There is nothing of medieval sin in that. I repeat the words of Sri Ram, the great philosopher. He used to say, I walk toward my ideal, toward my life's mission. If a gentle breeze blows, I delight in the gentle breeze. If a scorching sun shines, I endure the scorching sun. But neither one nor the other takes me off my path. So, the desire for comfort is harmful, but comfort itself is not. Enjoy it. If it appears along your way, but if comfort is over there and I abandon everything to chase after it, that is something we must be mindful of. The selfishness of wanting to shield ourselves from everything leads to low immunity. Today, we are already very familiar with this. Many times, our children, whom we wrap in cotton wool, end up with low immunity to any element. They can't get dirty, they can't have pets. And we know that, from a health perspective, this is harmful. The earlier a child deals with these aggressive agents of nature, these pollutants, the more they will develop resistance to them. Today, we see a consequence of this, which is both somewhat amusing and thought-provoking. Young people who begin to withdraw from social interaction and spend their time in front of their video games or on social media. The world is dual. If they go outside, they will be exposed to joy, to sadness, to aggression, and to affection. And this is exhausting. To avoid this exhaustion, they remain in a virtual world where everything is pleasant. If something is not pleasant, I delete it, I change the channel, I unfriend this person. In other words, they create an artificial world that leaves them psychologically unprepared for the instabilities of real life. And this is something that has increasingly produced complex side effects. Exposing ourselves to duality, learning to deal with adversity, and understanding that adversities exist to propel us to a different level of consciousness. Iona. Remember what we always say, the most effective method for you to move from this level to that one is a staircase. The staircase will take you from this level and place an obstacle in your path. And when you come up against this obstacle and do not find continuity on this plane, you will make the effort to move on to the next level. Without obstacles, you remain at the same level of consciousness. In other words, difficulties propel us to new levels. The little tests our children take at school help them move beyond that grade, and we see this as a good thing. So, reach a level of consciousness where you see difficulties as something positive. If we look back and see all the difficulties we have gone through to get to where we are, perhaps we will come to the conclusion that it was not a high price to pay. It was a fair price for what was given to me, for what I was allowed to learn. So, this desire for comfort leads to stagnation, where we stop along the way at what seems pleasant and comfortable to us, but not necessarily what is good. What is good does not always coincide with what is pleasant. Pay close attention to this detail. What is good is that which makes us grow. What is pleasant often holds us back. Our taste is not so refined. If we learn to appreciate what makes us grow, even difficulties would become pleasant. To enjoy challenges, notice that this is somewhat innate, somewhat inherent within the human being. Take your child to an amusement park, and he will want to ride the roller coaster. He will want the tallest Ferris wheel there is. And he feels a certain drive, a certain joy in facing challenges. Where is that spirit in adults? Where have we hidden it? What layer of fear has been placed between us and our love for adventure? I remember on one occasion, back when there were still video rental stores, which are quite rare now, I took the time to ask the clerk about this. I asked him which genre is rented the most. Adventure, he replied. I found that very amusing. People love adventure, modern people enjoy it on television. In other words, that drive to face obstacles, to see what lies on the other side of the world, to turn the world inside out just to see if it's well stitched together. In other words, the challenge, the love of challenge, we experience it by going through a virtual adventure where we become passive spectators. Comfort, or an excessive love of comfort, creates a kind of numbness within us. It dulls our drive, our desire to expand, to see new horizons. So, this is the third step. Moving forward, work as the ambitious do. And this is very timely. This step is perfect. Imagine that, for some reason, we have put it in our minds that a spiritual person, a virtuous person, must be somehow contemplative and passive. But we are in the world, and to act in the world, we need to work with its laws. We need to know how to handle material reality. We can't just pretend the wall doesn't exist. The wall doesn't exist. If I walk into it, it'll hurt my face because it won't move out of my way just because I have a metaphysical belief that, on some level, it doesn't exist. I'm in this reality. I have a body, and therefore, I must understand how to handle it to know the laws of the material world. If a spiritualist, while living in this world, understands the laws of the material world less than a materialist does, then spiritualism has very little practical value. It makes an unadapted person. We are here because it is our place to be here. Therefore, we must learn the rules of this house and know how to navigate them even better than those who limit themselves to a purely materialistic view. Otherwise, spiritualism would simply be a symptom of powerlessness. So, if a materialist comes and says, I am going to build a 10-story building, the spiritualist should be able to say, I am going to build a 20-story building. But the difference is, it is not for myself, not for my own selfishness, it is to fulfill a need, a human need, it is to contribute to my ideal. It may even be that I make material use of it, because I am an incarnate human being, I have needs. I'm not advocating that anyone should become a beggar, that no one should abandon all of their possessions. Material things in themselves have no virtue, but they should also serve to contribute to humanity. Remember the mango tree. A mango tree, in order to produce another mango tree, needs only a single mango, yet it produces dozens, feeding many people, sometimes hundreds. In other words, this abundance, proportional to one's motivation, is what characterizes a spiritualist. The spiritualist does not create something just for today. They are capable of building something that will last for centuries, sometimes even for millennia. In other words, they must have a greater ability to work with material things than a materialist does. Otherwise, spirituality becomes impotence. So, work as the ambitious do. Keep your head in the heavens and your feet on the earth. Be a bridge builder. May our elevated motivations not make us less capable than those who live at ground level, driven only by earthly motivations. Truly understand spirituality as a sign of willpower, strength, initiative, and the ability to accomplish. Respect life as those who desire it do. Continuing still on this level. Respect life as those who desire it do. Look how interesting this is. Those who desire life wrap it in cotton wool. And those who are spiritualists, who respect the cycle of life but are not attached to it as if it were a material possession, should be able to respect it even more than those who desire it. Let me give you an example. I always like to mention that expression by Leonardo da Vinci, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. To understand this idea in a simpler, clearer way, I remember something that happened to me many years ago, which I always like to share. When I lived in a city in the northeast, João Pessoa, there was water rationing. And my little daughter, very young, came home one day very upset. She was about 5 years old. And she came in saying, "Look, Mom, my classmate said that she's not going to save water because her father can pay for it." Just imagine how absurd that is. It's not about being able to pay, it's about the water itself. Poor thing. She's going to feel so sad being treated that way. Friends, this was an experience that touched me so deeply, because the innocence of a child allows her to put herself in the place of the water. It's not because, from a utilitarian perspective, I'm afraid it might run out for me, but because it is a being, just like me, that deserves respect. I found this incredible, this capacity for empathy, this latent wisdom within humanity, which is still present in a 5-year-old child. In other words, I respect life, and even more than that, I respect those who need water to live. I show respect because I consider water to be a being in itself. Alive, a being that occupies a fundamental place in nature, a great ally in the process of life. So, I respect it for its own sake, not because of my personal interest. That old saying, if you use it wisely, it will never run out. In other words, if I knew it would never run out, I might use it carelessly, because then water itself would not deserve respect. What deserves respect is my own utility. So, a spiritualist who understands that things exist in themselves, that he is not the center of the world, that things possess their own value, respects them for what they are, he must respect them even more than a materialist who respects things only for their usefulness. He respects life as those who desire it do. Understand this. Or perhaps even more than those who desire it, because you know the reason why. And they only know how. They only know the use, not the ultimate purpose of things. And continuing to be happy, like those who live for the sake of happiness. That is truly beautiful. To be happy like those who live for happiness. Those who seek nothing but happiness. To be happy like them. There is a passage, I'll borrow it from Immanuel Kant, who wrote some beautiful things in the foundations of the metaphysics of morals. Kant says the following: human happiness is something you always find when you are not seeking it. Seek human duty, and happiness arises as a byproduct. Because if you pursue human happiness directly, you will want to be happy at any cost. And the happiness you achieve will not be truly human. So, I want to be happy at any cost. Well, Genghis Khan felt happy, Attila the Hun felt happy, massacring the children of their enemies, and many other tyrants throughout history have felt happy while committing atrocities. When you seek happiness at any cost, the happiness you achieve will not be truly human. But I seek my duty, I want to be just, I want to be fraternal, I want to be kind. I want to be generous, I want to be a positive force in the lives of others. Do this, find that sense of duty. And what you will receive as a byproduct is happiness. But it will be genuine, human happiness, the kind you truly deserve. In other words, love happiness as those who live for it do, but do not live solely for it. They live according to their human nature, to their duty as human beings. That is truly beautiful. Reflect on this for a moment. Continuing on. Eliminate all sense of separateness. We have already spoken a bit about this, about the heresy of separateness as discussed in the Voice of the Silence. It goes on to say, the sin and shame of the world are your sin and your shame, for you are part of the world. There is a phrase that I find very beautiful, an old one, which says the following: something of us falls with the one who plunges into the abyss, and something of us rises with the one who reaches the heavens. Because we are one, whether we are aware of it or not. So, when we learn that a human being, somewhere in the world, has committed a great atrocity, has descended into the abysses of human consciousness, know that something, a cell of yours, descended with them. And if we are to walk toward the human ideal, if we are to move toward unity together with the entire universe, we will have to rescue that cell which fell into the abyss. We will not get there without it. It is a part of us. Therefore, it is natural to feel sorrow when we learn that a human being has fallen into the abyss. Be careful, because sometimes when we see atrocities in the news, it provokes hatred in us, a desire to kill. Well, what led a person to commit that atrocity was hatred and the desire to kill. And by feeling that toward them, you do not fight against it, you reinforce the very feeling that led them into the abyss. If you feel a profound mercy, because no one is in a worse situation than a human being who commits an atrocity. It is a person worthy of the deepest compassion, because to be rescued from that abyss, they will have to endure immense suffering. The future? It holds very difficult moments, and that is also our responsibility. Something within us has descended into the depths. So, to understand this process, to feel yourself as part of humanity's pain and also its glory. To take this on is your own problem. This is fundamental. So, the sin and the shame of the world are also your sin and your shame, because you are part of the world. And he goes on to say, abstain, because it is right to abstain, and not just to keep yourself clean. That's interesting, isn't it? So, I do not commit a wrong. Why is that? Because of principles, I realize that this does not contribute, it does not align with my sense of purpose in life. It is not consistent with what I'm. But I do not become proud of this, because otherwise, along with a virtue, you acquire vanity. It is right to abstain, but not because you feel disgust for it. Notice that, as we begin to evolve, along with the virtue we have acquired, comes the vanity of having acquired that virtue, which compromises and diminishes it. So, I'm a person who does not smoke. I'm above that. Well, the abstinence from smoking is accompanied by the vanity of being someone who practices abstinence. I do not know to what extent you have gained or lost with this virtue you have acquired. In other words, we should consider that we have done nothing more than our duty by abstaining from that which is not humane. But we should not feel disgust, not only for things, but also for those who are still prisoners of those things. Because our pride and our vanity contaminate all of our achievements. This is an interesting element, because spiritual vanity is the worst of all. It is the most subtle, the hardest to perceive, and the most difficult to overcome. The ultimate unity justifies and ennobles the present moment. This is my own statement, not from the book, and it is based on an example I really like to share from Professor Jorge Angel Livraga, founder of New Aropolis. He asks you to imagine yourself inside a house. And this house has its windows and doors tightly shut. You do not like the sun. I don't want anything to do with the sun. It doesn't come into my house. One day, you change your perspective and decide to make peace with the sun. You open the doors, you open the windows. The distance between you and the sun has not changed at all, but the very act of being willing to open the doors and windows allows the sun to illuminate you right where you are. In other words, placing yourself in contact with unity, which lies at the end of our entire journey, already transforms our present, even if we have not yet taken a single step toward that unity. At that moment, I can no longer allow myself to think certain things or to act in ways that disregard respect for others, the well-being of others, or the needs of others, because I'm a person whose ultimate destiny as the sun is unity. It illuminates me where I'm, even if I have not taken a single step. This is important for us to understand. Placing ourselves in contact with unity is the only way to truly overcome separateness. I always like to emphasize 2 points that I would very much like you to understand. The difference between moral behavior and moral consciousness. Many times people come to me and say, "Look at how that person parks in that spot." Right, they don't speed, or how certain people behave properly, do things the right way. I keep thinking, well, is this a moral behavior trained by a whole set of customs that have been passed down, or is it true moral consciousness? When someone does this, do they think about whether it will benefit someone else? Will this make someone else's life easier? Or is it simply following a set of trained behaviors to be considered civilized, first world, or something of that sort? When faced with a greater social emergency, is this truly a person who has compassion for others, who has love for others? Is their attitude truly filled with love and genuine concern for others, or is it just mechanical training? Because a mechanical training, a machine, could do the same. So, consider that there is no real way to overcome separateness unless it becomes a life goal. The one, if we do not wish to move toward this mystery, which is the whole, if the cell does not wish to consciously become part of the body, if the drop does not wish to consciously move toward the ocean. Unity enlightens us in this moment and gives a human meaning to our actions. Morality is no longer just training. Training is not human. It works in many cases for the animal world, but not for human beings. It is a thin layer that offers very little protection. When life puts us in difficult situations, the same old selfishness emerges because training does not hold up in the face of adversity. It only responds when faced with a familiar scenario. When that scenario falls away, the coarse, rude, and selfish person that has always existed resurfaces. Things are not that simple. Things cannot be reduced to a well-framed appearance. The root of prejudice is also something interesting. Let us address this here, as we are talking about overcoming separateness. Separateness is directly related to prejudice. Then we will overcome this racial prejudice, this sexual prejudice, this religious prejudice, this ethnic prejudice. Deep down, campaigns to overcome isolated prejudices are very well intentioned, but not very effective. It is as if I wanted to overcome a puddle of water, a leak, only when it drips onto my couch. Then I protect the couch, or if it falls on my floor and leaves a stain, then I protect my floor. But I do not address the leak itself. I do not address the root cause of the problem. The root of all prejudices, without a shadow of a doubt, is the Socratic prejudice. Close your eyes and you think, I'm better than everyone else. Then, when I open my eyes, I'll see the characteristics of the self, my color, my religion, my gender, and I impose these characteristics on others. This is a consequence of the internal premise that the self has more value than the other. There is no point in overcoming external effects if you do not overcome this internal premise that myself has the right to prevail over all other selves, which are seen as belonging to an inferior category. If you do not address the cause, the source of the leak, you are simply moving the puddle to another place, and that does not solve the problem. This is not effective against separateness. Well, continuing on, let us move to the sixth step, which is to kill the desire for sensation. Understand the subtlety here. It is not about killing sensations themselves. That would be absurd. How could we do that? We are in the world, and sensations themselves are not bad. They are gateways for information, raw material to be processed in the laboratory of our consciousness, from which drops of wisdom are extracted. We came into this world to gather these drops. Sensations are not bad. What must be eliminated is the desire for sensation. This desire leads to addiction to the things that the senses bring. And in this prison, looking outward, toward the things of the world, sensations often serve as a shield for those who wish to escape from themselves. That is why I often mention in my lectures on solitude that people who fear solitude, because solitude is not the same as isolation, they are different things. Isolation is necessarily negative. Solitude, on the other hand, can be highly productive. It is a moment for inner life. Those who are afraid of solitude are generally running away from meeting themselves, and they use sensations as distractions to such an extent that there can be no pauses, not a single moment when they are simply with themselves. Because what if I come across a terrible existential anguish? What if I encounter a dreadful inner emptiness? So, I cannot allow myself this moment of encounter. So, everyone knows when this person is home alone, because they turn on the television, the computer, the phone, and the stereo. It's all that paraphernalia pulling them outward. Addicted to the pleasures that sensations bring, ultimately using sensations as crutches. All to avoid ever meeting themselves and engaging in that necessary internal dialogue that leads to a true evaluation of life, recognition and a change in methods and attitude toward the future. This is frightening. So, sensations become crutches, lures that constantly draw our attention outward. And we end up living an extremely superficial life, because if we lack an inner life, our outer life will be one of appearances, of interactions that do not foster deep feelings, that do not create profound connections. I repeat that phrase I like to use, the more within, the more without. So, these habits we acquire, often from various sources, auditory, visual, gustatory, wherever they may come from, end up becoming bonds, shackles, that take away our ability to turn inward. They generate withdrawal symptoms when we do not have them. It is necessary to have a strategy to tackle one thing at a time, breaking small chains along the way. Often, when we confront an addiction, whatever it may be, we take on a somewhat quixotic attitude, in the negative sense, that is, I will defeat it right now. But it's not quite like that. If every day we eliminate a small instance of that addiction, actually, the ideal is that you take a subproduct of that addiction, a specific moment, I am addicted to doing this particular thing in the mornings, then I cut just that, nothing more. Soon enough, you will have eliminated the manifestation of that addiction throughout the entire day. If you are going to face a giant, don't stand right in front of it, trying to defeat it on the very first day. Instead, pull out a single hair from it every day, without hurry and without pause. Pedagogically, establish a rhythm of life in which you accumulate small victories every day. And gradually cut the ties that make you a slave to your sensations. I repeat, they are not bad, but they do not exist to rule over your life. So, once again, reiterating what we have already said, the struggle is with desires, which often become addictions, and not with the sensation itself. The sensation itself is not bad, it is a source of information. It is from this raw material that we bring inside ourselves and synthesize the most precious things in life. The information that comes from within, which also exists because there are also internal senses, and the information that comes from outside, when combined and reflected upon during moments of inner life, allow us to extract the essence of what we acquire in this life. Each day, we extract wisdom, we shape our identity, and we achieve fulfillment. It is essential to know how to use both of these worlds, so as not to become a prisoner of either one. Continuing, lastly for today, it is about satisfying the hunger for growth. Ambition and anxiety are redirected toward the spiritual. When we experience this hunger for growth, in other words, why do I grow? It is the natural result of walking the path every day. But I do not become desperate imagining the day I will be as great as Confucius. Because that is another kind of vanity. It is ambition and vanity transferred to a metaphysical plane, but just as harmful, or perhaps even more so. Once again, paraphrasing that passage from Kant, which I mentioned earlier in relation to happiness. It also applies here if we consider it in relation to the human ideal. The human ideal, which is wisdom, values, and virtues, is attained only when you are not actively seeking it. But how I'll achieve an ideal if I do not desire it? The human ideal is a point of reference, a direction to follow, and not an object of desire or anxiety. Every time I look along the path, my ideal is there. Wisdom is there to help redirect my steps whenever I stray. But if I become anxious about the human ideal, I lose today, the very place from which you'll draw the knowledge and reflection that allow me to move forward. It is in today. So, how do I reach an ideal if I do not desire it? By bringing the ideal into today. Make today an ideal day. Live with the greatest intensity possible. This moment we are experiencing right now. Be present in both body and soul. Live it deeply. The attainment of the ideal is the sum of many ideal days, and not empty days in which you were lost, longing for a future that never arrives. Bring the ideal into the present moment. The human ideal is a reference point, a direction, not an object onto which you project your anxieties and desires. Make all your days ideal and walk without haste and without pause, with rhythm, just as all of life does. Walk with rhythm. Life does not lose its rhythm. Our heart does not lose its rhythm. Otherwise, we would not be alive. But it does not become anxious to merge with the great heart. It fulfills its mission for today. Ideal days will lead us to the fullness of the human ideal. Well, we will stop here for today. I hope that this video serves as a source of reflection. This is not a book to be read quickly. It is a book to be chewed over, reflected upon, and developed within our own inner laboratory. As the alchemists would say, work, work, and poison yourself. Pray, work, and you will discover. Do this in relation to our brief lecture. We are working with a very special book, one that demands deep reflection. And may these moments be truly enjoyable for you all. Thank you very much. I would absolutely, truly, genuinely like you. I would very, very much like you.